And then there's this whole Alexandrian school who are discussed by Philo. They're called the Therapeutes. And Philo, and this is before we hear anything about Christianity. Philo is writing and publishing this stuff in about 20 to 30 AD, so before Jesus even starts his ministry according to Christian tradition. So there's absolutely no way Philo was influenced by Jesus Christ in any way, shape, or form, if he even existed. He starts talking about these Therapeutes at Alexandria, at Lake Mareotis, outside of the city, who are very much like we picture Christian monastics to be. They're wearing, or how Jesus was, wearing white robes perhaps, and living in a very kind of monkish manner, but they had women there too, so it wasn't, the Essenes were a bit different in that regard. They were even more fanatical about being separate and away from not only other cults that would offend them, but women as well. More of the monasteries that we look at, we think of today, but these Therapeutes, this is a really fascinating smoking gun key to the whole shebang, piece of the puzzle that almost nobody pays much attention to. In fact, they dismiss it with the wave of the hand by saying that the testimony connecting the Therapeutes to the Christians is just a mistake. It's an anachronism that couldn't possibly be real. And so in that regard, the literature on the subject is pretty thin. And in the analysis of who the Therapeutes were, see, Philo mentions these Therapeutes. He says they had an organization that was headquartered or essentially existed at Lake Mareotis, that they used ancient, they had written their own texts. They used the Torah, Tanakh, the Old Testament, as their holy scriptures, but they had also written allegorizing texts. And church historian Eusebius comes along and says, aha, those are the early Christians, and their texts are the precursors to the Gospels. Now, they're not supposed to have any precursors to the Gospels. It was supposed to be like just the Holy Spirit transmitting or helping the recollection of the people who supposedly witnessed a real thing. Not, oh, has an evolutionary background. I mean, this right there pretty much proves what I call the Christ conspiracy. So they took somebody's allegorizing texts having to do with the Old Testament and reworked them to become the New Testament. That's what he's saying. And I think this is one of the instances where Eusebius is speaking the truth. He's correct. But that is so inconvenient to church history that it is completely swept under. And again, that's part of a conspiracy. That's a deliberate effort. That's not just a mistake. Ooh, we've just, one day, oh, silly me. They're contriving this. They're contriving to hide this. Okay, so I think we're right in being a bit suspicious of this history when you realize how much is hidden. Because when you open up that nut, that Therapeutan Pandora's box there, you will find a whole mess of stuff falling out, including some of these texts I think had to be the intertestamental literature. And if you look at some of the intertestamental literature, it is so Christian that even that is now dismissed. Oh, it's got to be interpolated by Christians. They must have worked over it. They definitely, which in itself admits that Christians were working over older texts to Christianize them, and that's what we're saying they did. They Christianized these older texts. They worked them over. But if we could determine that these texts had not been just worked over by Christians long after the fact, they actually are quite blatant bridges between the Old Testament and the New Testament.